more than 14 minutes away from the launch tonight. We're seeing the all panel elements green, meaning that all the systems go for the launch. Like the two satellites, also the Ariane 4 launcher had a very long journey to here by a very well known traveled route here. The launcher campaign is the well-ordered process leading to today of the launch. Now we see Mr. Mohamed Osman and Steve Dorfman from Hughes Space Group.
There's Bill Snell, the mission director for Measat. We seem to have a problem. The Ariane 4 rocket, earmarked for tonight's launch, crossed the Atlantic Ocean from Europe aboard the freighter Toucan. The disassembled launcher was then trucked here to the Guyana Space Center. On October 4th, the first stage of the rocket was placed on the assembly table, marking the beginning of what we call the launch campaign. The following day, the second stage was clamped down onto the first, as we see here. Then the 4 liquid strap-on boosters used in this particular configuration of the Ariane 4 were fixed into place at the base of the first stage. The following day, the third stage, what we call the cryotechnic stage, was hoisted into place and securely fastened. In what has now become a well-oiled process, on the following day, we lifted into place the equipment bay, the platform that holds all the electronic equipment necessary to command and control the launcher during flight. There's the equipment bay. On October 25th, the assembled launcher was then moved from the assembly area to the launch area, using a huge moving platform. Now the cryotechnic arms were reinstalled onto the third stage. We use these arms to fill the final stage with liquid fuels, as we will discuss later in the broadcast. Finally, a huge gantry was moved into place around the rocket to protect it until the day of launch. "12 minutes and 5 seconds, counting down for tonight's Flight 92 of the European launcher Ariane. These two satellites together weigh 9,200 pounds. And Measat, this particular Ariane 4 has been specially configured to handle that payload.
Yes, Paul, our customers' satellites mass figures determine which configuration of the Ariane 4 launcher to be used. We have 6 different configurations for the Ariane 4 launcher. Tonight, 44L being the most powerful in the Ariane 4 family.
We're going to be talking tonight about what we call downrange stations, which are different ground stations that are going to be following the flight of Ariane. And those stations are going to be receiving a stream of data during the entire flight. That data is collected here at a special center in the Guyana Space Center complex. In fact, this, where the data is collected is on the top of a mountain called the Montagne des Pères. We're here on the Montagne des Pères, in the computer center where we collect and evaluate the telemetry from each Ariane launch. From this center, we follow, in real time, a vast stream of data that we receive from the launch vehicle, beginning in the final moments of the countdown. We call this process and this center the CVI, Immediate Visual Control. From the 700 different telemetry readings we follow during flight, we work with a sampling of 70 key parameters. These allow us to monitor the health and functioning of the Ariane 4 and the satellites aboard. Once the rocket flies beyond the range of our center here in Kourou, we continue to read the telemetry via downrange stations in Natal, Brazil, then on Ascension Island in the Atlantic Ocean, and then from a ground station in Libreville, Gabon, on the west coast of Africa. The Libreville station, for instance, follows the mission during the critical phase when the two satellites separate from the third stage of the Ariane rocket. This information is immediately relayed back here to the Telemetry Evaluation Center. Here we collect and evaluate all the relevant information, and then, by telephonic link, we relay it to the mission directors at Jupiter Control. They, in turn, formally announce the completion of this critical phase of the mission. From here, we also perform another key operation for Ariane space. Within a few hours of the launch, we receive the complete stream of telemetry transmitted by the Ariane rocket throughout its flight. We then sift through this massive information, distill it, and then make it available for review by the relevant departments of Ariane space. This gives us a complete and detailed picture of the entire Ariane mission. As a result, within only 8 days, we are in a position to set forth a complete review and evaluation of the performance of the Ariane rocket. With this in hand, we can then move ahead with full confidence to the next scheduled launch. As you can see, our status panel is all green. That means all systems are go for tonight's launch. Now 8 minutes and 42 seconds and counting down. The Ariane 4 poised on the launch pad down range a bit from here, or a little bit further down the beach almost, actually, and of course it launches straight out over the Atlantic Ocean. Our teams from Measat, that's Mr. Ebadi, and before that we saw Mr. Osman. They're certainly getting a bit anxious as the moments tick off here in what's going to be a very important moment for them and the two different companies they represent. We have been, I think, pretty much cleared Measat on the weather. It looks like we're all set in weather terms, and the clearing that held for today seems to be holding up just fine for us.
That's true, Paul. Weather is one of the important factors that we have to satisfy prior to the launch. For example, the wind conditions are very important. If I may give some numbers, like the wind speed should be between 9 to 14 meters per second.
We've had a very busy day here. There's been fueling going on. There's been all kinds of last-minute preparations. And one of the things that was done earlier today was the withdrawal of the big gantry. Measat, explain to us the importance of the gantry.
Gantry is like a very heavy metal housing. It protects the launcher from the moment of launcher is rolled out to the launch pad till today, which we moved the gantry back some 5 hours and 30 minutes before this time. It basically protects the launcher from the external conditions, from heat, from rain, and also it allows us to do some work on the launcher and the payloads that we put on top of the launcher.
Again, to give you some numbers about what a massive structure this is, it weighs something like 4,000 tons, and it's almost as tall as the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Now we're coming up, Measat, to another very key moment here in this launch. We're now at 6 minutes 38 seconds and counting down. At the 6-minute mark, that is a very important moment in any Ariane launch. It's the beginning of what we call the synchronized sequence. Please explain to our viewers around the world what happens during that synchronized sequence.
This sequence is used for the final preparation of the launcher, and it is fully automatic, controlled in parallel up to H0-5 seconds by the two ground computers control this phase. Now we're seeing Coel, Mr. Jean Rebeau.
He's running the launch center.
Yes, he is the man in command in the launch preparation complex, which we call CDL for the Ariane 4.
And give us some indication of what those two computers are checking out at this moment.
Well, one computer configures fluids and propellants for flight and performs all the associated tasks. The other computer executes all the final preparation of the electrical systems, like initiation of the flight program and startup of some of the servo motors and switch over from ground power to flight batteries, etc. And also checks all the corresponding operations and receives the telemetry from the launcher with regard to the execution of those commands.
We're now 5 minutes 7 seconds and counting down. Our status panel is all clear. We seem to be right on course for a launch within exactly 5 minutes. Get a sense now of the sense of anticipation. This, of course, is the 92nd Ariane flight. But no matter how many we've lived through, there's always a certain amount of tension and excitement. An awful lot is riding on the top of this big Ariane 4 launcher. Certainly for Arabsat, Mr. Al-Bidna and his group. Certainly also for Measat. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Perhaps at this stage, Measat, maybe you could give us a preview of some of the things that our viewers around the world will be seeing in the few moments leading to the final countdown and into the liftoff.
Well, at this point, all the three major players, including launcher and the two satellite preparation teams, are approaching to the liftoff moment, preparing the launcher and the two satellites. For example, now spacecrafts by this time should be switched over to their onboard power. The power is provided by their onboard batteries, for example, and also launcher is being prepared for H0 moment. A lot of operations are automatically is being taken care. Now we're seeing Mr. Guy Perez. He is the Arabsat 2B program manager from Aerospatiale.
Right, which constructed this satellite and has a long relationship with Arabsat. One of the things we're going to be looking at is the cryotechnic arms. There's a shot of them right now. What, Measat, do those arms do?
Well, their role is very important. A little more than 3 hours before, we started loading the liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen into the third stage fuel tanks. This fuel is cryogenic, kept at very, very low temperatures by its nature, and to prevent the evaporization from their tanks, we do this at the very last time through these two arms.
And those two arms will be pulled away only right before liftoff, and enables those fuels to be topped up to their absolute maximum before launch. 2 minutes now, 33 seconds. The countdown is proceeding normally. And I should explain that at this stage, and a little bit later, within the 1 minute mark, what we tend to do here is withdraw a bit so that our viewers around the world, and also our viewers here in Jupiter, can live this moment live, just the way the engineers of Ariane Space and Arabsat and Measat are living it, to get a sense of the tension and the excitement as we count down, now coming near the 2 minute mark. Measat, though, there might be just one or two things you could add about what our viewers might see in those first seconds after liftoff, just so they don't get caught with any surprises.
Okay, well, at H0 instant, the ignition command is sent to the first stage main engines and the 4 liquid strap-on boosters. But we need some time to build enough thrust at the first stage and the liquid strap-on boosters. Then some 4 seconds after that ignition command is received by those parts, we're going to see a slow rise of the launcher through the launch pad.
So there's a slight delay between ignition and actual liftoff.
A little more than 4 seconds, I would say.
Excellent. And there'll be some panels, too, that will be dropping by the wayside.
Yeah, those panels are the thermal protections against for the thermal concerns that they protect the second stage fuel.
We're coming up now to the 1 minute mark, and at that moment we will withdraw to the background and live this live. 1 minute, 57 seconds. Status panel all green. Seconds. 20. Final countdown. Ignition. there she goes. Flight 92 of the Ariane launcher. Headed up into the night sky, 20 seconds into the flight. Those four big Viking engines roaring. The strap-on boosters roaring. Beautiful plume coming down from the back of the rocket. The countdown was perfect. The entry into flight looks absolutely on course, Measat.
Yes, Paul, now we see Ariane 4 really lifted perfectly from its launch pad.
There's enormous thrust coming right now, isn't there?
Yes, I think at this point the thrust is equivalent to almost the 7 jumbo jet 747 takeoff.
And of course it needs all that to get a 9,200-pound payload up into the air.
From the 0 speed and vertically, of course.
We're now 1 minute 18 seconds into the flight. All systems appear to be quite normal. Measat, give our viewers around the world some sense of the different parameters that we'll be able to follow. Oh, we can hear the rocket moving right overhead.
It's really rumbling on top of us.
Yes, it's rumbling this big Jupiter complex here.
Well, here, some of the salient parameters that we see on the screen. T indicates the elapsed time from the H0 ignition command execution. A indicates the altitude, launcher altitude. Some 22 kilometers is at this point, and the speed of the launcher is a little less than 1 kilometer per second. It's a very big speed for a mass like this.
Now it's fully 1 kilometer per second. And we'll be following tonight the actual trajectory of the rocket. You can see it in this, following the curve. You can see inching up and across. That's the actual flight pattern of the Ariane 4. I think we just saw something jettisoned, Measat, at a little more than 2 minutes. Give us a sense of the major events that we'll be looking for during the flight.
Well, a little over, well, I mean, at 2 minutes and 32 seconds mark, we're going to have the separation of the liquid strap-on boosters. And a minute later than that, the first stage will complete its job and then separate from the launcher. As we see, the marker is right on the trajectory curve, and
so everything is absolutely on course, as we can see at this stage.
that is correct.
And then, of course, we begin the third stage burn, which is the longest part of this flight. I think we begin that, yes, at 5 minutes 48 seconds. That's a long, long burn, Measat. That's the key moment, in a sense, isn't it, for the work of the Ariane 4?
That is correct. Well, we may say all the parts and all the parts of the launcher, they have very important tasks. You know, we need all of them to perform their functions as foreseen, as scheduled, nominally. But third stage, yes, by its nature, it's a very important part of the launcher.
Now, also, one of the things that we'll be talking about is what we call the jettisoning of the fairing. Perhaps the viewers following us tonight remember that the two satellites were put inside a capsule. But that capsule isn't necessary beyond a certain point, is it, Measat?
No, it is not. That protects the satellites from the outside effects. As we pass the critical zone of the atmosphere, then we don't need. And as soon as we satisfy the thermal flux values, our thermal flux values, then the...
In fact, I think judging from the screen here, the separation of the coif, which is the fairing,
yes,
is exactly that moment when the fairing has been released. I think we've now passed that point. We're waiting for confirmation of that event. There's part of the Measat team, Mr. Ebadi, watching the flight very carefully. Everything seems to be on course. We're now 4 minutes and 48 seconds into the flight.
Yes, our altitude is a little over 130 kilometer, and we reached to 4.3 kilometer per second speed.
So the speed is quadrupled from when we just spoke about it a few moments ago. And now on the screen, where it says separation, the second and third, that's the second and third stage. Tell us, Measat, a bit about what we call the Spelda, which is a something that we might be talking about a little bit later when we talk about the injection into orbit of these two satellites.
I think the unique characteristics of the Ariane launcher is that Ariane performs the dual launch, meaning like tonight we're launching two satellites. And as we shown in the figures before, the Arabsat 2B was configured on top. But then we have to house the lower position satellite. That's Measat, and
so the spell is what allows this dual launch.
yes,
Okay. By my calculations, we are now in the third stage burn. Am I right?
yes.
Okay.
And all the parameters look nominal, and we're right on top of the trajectory curve.
Excellent. 6 minutes and 6 seconds now into the flight. There's a computer diagram of the separation of the quaff, which we discussed earlier. I think perhaps now, Measat, we could talk about the two different kinds of satellites that we have aboard the top of Ariane right now. Arabsat constructed the Arabsat satellite. It's what we call a three-axis stabilized satellite. What exactly does that mean?
Well, that comes from the attitude control subsystem characteristics. You know, there are two major group of satellites. One is the three-axis stabilized, like Arabsat group, Arabsat class, and the other one is the spinner satellites. With the three-axis stabilized satellites, this platform uses a three-axis stabilization system for all mission phases, using the very simple and reliable momentum bias system. And also there is some redundant pitch wheels to support this attitude control functions.
Let me interrupt you here to say that the tracking of the satellite has now been turned over to the Natal, Brazil station, and they'll be receiving the telemetry data we discussed earlier, and then they will be relaying it back to the CVI up atop on the top of the Montagne des Pères, as we discussed earlier. Now, the Measat satellite, by contrast to the Arabsat satellite, is cylindrical. As I think everybody saw, it's cylindrical. And it's a very interesting design that was developed by a man who's considered to be one of the primary visionaries of the world of space and telecommunications, a man named Harold Rosen at Hughes. I'm told that he was inspired in terms of this spin satellite, in part by the flight, watching the flight, of an American football. And he decided, and he noticed that the spin on the football helped stabilize the flight of the football. And he then applied that same idea to the idea of a spinning satellite, cylindrical in nature. And he developed, with others, of course, at Hughes, the first spinner satellite as far back as 1963. Since then, Hughes has developed and launched 45 spinners of that type. This particular spinner, though, that is now on its way to becoming part of the Measat family, is, of course, a major evolution from that first satellite of 1963. This particular spinner is equipped with gallium arsenide solar cells, and these deliver 40% more payload power as compared to silicon cells. As I understand it from Hughes engineers, this particular model of the spinner also has a new lightweight, high-gain shaped antenna. This features a specially contoured surface that increases gain and eliminates the need for what's called multiple feed horns. Additionally, this particular satellite uses two different kinds of fuels, solid and liquid. This is for station keeping and attitude control maneuvers. Everything now, 9 minutes and 23 seconds into this flight, appears to be on course. I hope our audience now understands the difference between these two different kinds of satellites. Everything, Measat, seems to be quite on course.
Yes, so far everything is as planned, right on the course, which was foreseen. Our altitude reached now, we reached to some 237 kilometers, and the speed of the third stage with its payloads attached with it's around 6.3 kilometers per second.
Yes, and in a few moments we're going to be receiving formal notification that the tracking of the satellite has been what we call acquired by the ground station on Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Let's turn our attention back for a second, Measat, to the Arabsat 2B. We had a wonderful discussion this week with Saad Al-Bidna, the Director General of Arabsat, and his technical director, Mohammed Osman. They emphasized something that I found absolutely fascinating, that Arabsat 2B represents a major step toward integrating, of course, the television and telephone and other telecommunication services. But they also made the point, Measat, that these satellites and the tremendous area they cover have actually gone a good ways to unifying the Arab world and the 21 member countries of the Arab League.
Yes, that's also my understanding. I think we heard the words really indicated that it's a very important step in social, cultural, and linguistic integration of the entire Arab world, which is a very important issue, of course.
Right. And Arabsat 2A, the previous satellite launched earlier this year by Ariane, linked the Arab nations in terms of television and radio. And now this 2B is going to strengthen that network even further and also provide additional services in terms of both telephone, data, telecommunications links, and also it's going to serve remote areas. There's Mr. Al-Bidnat, of course, watching for the key moment coming up, which will be the injection into orbit of the Arabsat 2B. Everything, judging from our status panel, looks to be perfectly on course, Measat.
Yes, it is. So far, things are going perfectly as it's planned. Well, I can add a few more words also. That the Arabsat is truly a multinational operation, also employing engineers and technicians from across the Arab world. Its technical headquarters is in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and also there's a second ground station in Tunis, helping to coordinate the operations.
Right. I thought Mr. Al-Bidna made a good point. He said that the Arabsat was created by governments, but it's now being run on a for-profit commercial basis. In fact, he told us that 10 years ago, Arabsat had trouble actually filling its broadcast and telephone capacity. But today, thanks to the tremendous growth in telecommunication services, Arabsat is actually having trouble keeping up with demand. Fortunately, this Arabsat 2B is going to help them meet demand. He was, Mr. Al-Bidna actually did some training at the University of Colorado. He was elected Director General 5 years ago. And he was also very proudly told us that Arabsat is now turning a profit. I was also fascinated by the fact that they said that the TV programming, Measat, that's now received across the Arab world has been helping different countries understand difficult dialogues from their neighboring countries.
Yes, I think Mr. Al-Bidna made a very interesting point during our conversation, and I quote, thanks to television, there is an enlargement of the common knowledge of different Arabic dialects, and this has had a very much unifying effect culturally and politically. As a result, Arabsat has been an important means of promoting of a better understanding among the different Arab countries.
I think that's a pretty good example of what we call the global village that was predicted many years ago by the visionary Marshall McLuhan when he talked about a global village where everybody would somewhat speak languages that everybody else could understand. And the world has certainly gotten smaller, and we are definitely in the age of global communications, as tonight's operations underscore. We're coming up now, of course, rapidly approaching now. We're the 14-minute mark. We're approaching that injection into orbit, Measat.
Well, before then, Paul, first of all, third stage, it's going to complete its powerful flight. We are seeing on the curve X, it says H10. At that time, the third stage engine shut-off command will be initiated by the onboard computer. As soon as the third stage and the payload composite arrives to its intended orbit. Then also very important maneuvers of the payload composite will start. We call this, among our engineer friends, we call this space ballet, because the composite makes all these maneuvers, orients itself for a better injection of that particular satellite.
The word ballet suggests, of course, that they're going to go through these wonderful twists and contortions and leaps, but they're very carefully confined, aren't they? and directed by the ground stations so that the injection into orbit is very, very precise.
Yes, I think it's our one of our unique strength that we are very happy to provide a very precise injection, which then it is related to longer life. Our customers and injected payloads profit from that.
Of course, once we get in, we hear the official confirmation that Arabsat 2B has been injected into orbit. That part of the Ariane mission is done, but for the Arabsat people, it's just the beginning of some very serious work to come.
Of course, you know, like we said before, that we inject our customers' satellites into the geosynchronous geostationary transfer orbit. And from that point, from this elliptical orbit that we're placing them in, they have to raise their orbit, they have to make it circular for the days to come. And that takes some days to arrive at that point. But some minutes after the separation from us tonight, they will be acquired by their specific ground stations, that they will start getting the signals from their satellites indicating their health and the positions of the satellites, and then they're going to calculate the maneuvers to raise the orbit.
Right, and we're now moving rapidly toward that moment for Arabsat 2B. There's Guy Perez from Aerospatiale. He's been with this project for a long time. There's a long historical relationship between Arabsat and Aerospatiale.
As also we see on the screen that altitude of the composite now, it's going to increase a little more sharply. Also we see from the graphical display that we're coming very close to the third stage. Third stage is going to come to its intended orbit.
Mohammed Osman carefully now waiting for the climactic moment of the end of the third stage and the injection into orbit of Arabsat 2B. We've just received word that the tracking station that's now picking up the telemetry data we've been talking about all evening long is in Libreville, Gabon, on the west coast of Africa. It's following and receiving an enormous amount of data, isn't it, Measat, from the launcher?
Yes, we receive the telemetry, some number of telemetry points, telemetry words from the launcher. It indicates all the status of the launcher. We know what the launcher is doing every fraction of a second.
And as I think we mentioned earlier, that stream of data involves some 700 different readings, 70 of which we get right away, the rest of which we will be getting in the next several days to get a complete and full picture of how this operation has gone. 18 minutes and 21 seconds into the flight, approaching that key moment.
Now we're seeing, we just saw Mr. Ralph Yeager, Vice President of our commercial department.
We're waiting for the official word.
Yes, we were just informed that the third stage, it's completed its powerful flight. Now the orientation of the composite started to favor Arabsat 2B separation.
All right. Everything seems to be going absolutely as scheduled. 19 minutes, 26 seconds into the flight. As we can see from the screen, the Arabsat is approaching its rendezvous with its injection into orbit. Mr. Charles Bigot.
That's a very exciting moment for our customers, our Arabsat customers. Now we're seeing Mr. Mohammed Osman. We just heard that the first good news, the Arabsat 2B was separated from Ariane 4 launcher
And we get a thumbs up from Mohammed Osman and his team. Applause here at Jupiter 2. This is a big moment for the 21 countries of the Arab League and Arabsat partners.
Indeed, now the remaining of the third stage payload composite, now it is orienting itself, having enough distance from the separated Arabsat 2B satellite for the Measat separation.
Right, now we're going to turn our attention to Measat. We talked earlier this week with Ali Ebadi, one of the senior technical managers at Ariane, and he gave us a rather detailed profile of this dynamic telecommunications company serving Malaysia and East Asia. The headquarters, as we mentioned before, in Kuala Lumpur, and there's also a technical station employing 50 people on the island of Langkawi. Ariane is a private company licensed to provide Malaysia and the region with a number of different telecommunications services. An affiliate company, and I think this is very interesting, an affiliate company called Astro develops programming for television, particularly digital television right now. In fact, Mr. Ebadi told us that Ariane is the first digital system in the world to use the PAL standard. Astro is also the largest TV production studio in the Pacific. Now, Measat 2 will provide 100% coverage to Malaysia and a wide swath of East Asia. Malaysia, of course, and I think this is a very important point, it's a multiracial, multi-language country. And the new satellite network that Measat 2 will complement will provide additional capacity for Indian TV channels, Chinese TV channels, and channels in the local Malay. In fact, with Measat 2, the capacity of the system is going to expand to 40 available channels for the territory of Malaysia and up to 80 for the entire region. Now, 22 minutes and 12 seconds into the flight, everything seems to be absolutely on course as the launcher continues its rendezvous for Measat 2. There's been some relief, of course, now that Arabsat 2B is in orbit, but we still have one more piece of work to accomplish, Measat?
That is correct. Now we're coming more and more closer to Measat 2 separation point. Payload composite, it's doing its scar phase maneuvers to orient to realize the Measat 2 separation.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this has been a very busy year for Ariane. Perhaps we can turn our attention now to the various missions that Ariane Space has still on its plate, Measat, in the months and years ahead.
That's correct. Tonight, we are about to finalize the 10th launch of the year, and we have signed till today 18 contracts, which is putting our backlog a little more than 40 satellites to be launched for the years to come.
Right, and I understand that Ariane Space has ordered several more launch vehicles to ensure the same rhythm through the end of this century and into the year 2000.
Also, a few more things maybe we can mention very quickly that to meet growing market demands, Ariane Plus initiated a new personalized service, Ariane Plus Finance. This finance company will provide Ariane Plus customers with partial finance for their Ariane Plus launches.
Just yet another service now being added to the portfolio of Ariane Space products. The important thing, though, first and foremost, is Measat 2. 24 minutes, 25 seconds into the launch. Everything seems to be absolutely on course. Bill Snell, the mission director, keeping a close eye on things, waiting for the rendezvous. Very important for both this young company, Ariane, and the Malaysian, East Asian countries that it will serve. Moment of anticipation. awaiting formal announcement.
We just officially informed by the DDO that also Measat 2 satellite was successfully separated from the Ariane 4 launcher.
And as you can see, the Measat team is absolutely ecstatic and exuberant. The second successful launch for Measat this year by Ariane. The Ariane, once again, Measat, on Flight 92, did its work. Absolutely picture-perfect launch and injection into orbit. Mr. ABD is one happy customer, I can tell you that. Also very exuberant. We'll be hearing momentarily from Mr. Charles Bigot, the President and Director General of Ariane Space, as well as representatives of Arabsat and Measat. I can tell you that there's an enormous sense of satisfaction and relief here in Jupiter 2. Absolutely picture-perfect launch. On schedule, not a single hitch. As we saw, the flight pattern was absolutely held to in picture-perfect form. Certainly a certain amount of celebration down among the Malaysian contingent. And I hope that our viewers in Malaysia and across East Asia, as well as across the Arab world, have enjoyed watching this tremendous success tonight delivered by the Ariane Space team and the Ariane 4 rocket. In the moments ahead, we're going to have some replays from different camera angles of tonight's launch. They'll be a little bit different than what we saw, and some of them are often quite spectacular. We will not be talking during those replays. We'll just, again, retreat to the background. Here comes one right now. I think we can all get a sense of the relief here at Jupiter 2. It's been a very busy year, as we mentioned before, but at Measat next year, it's going to be even busier, perhaps, given that Ariane 5 is scheduled for another launch in April.
Yes, Paul, that's some important, very important milestones are ahead of us beside the scheduled Ariane 4 launches to satisfy our customer needs. Two more qualification flights, Ariane 502 and 503, are scheduled. First to take place sometime April 97, and then September-October time frame, the 503. And 504 launcher, from the hardware standpoint, will be ready to support early 98 504 launch, which will be the first commercial launch of the Ariane 5 family.
Well, the smiles we're seeing in Jupiter, I think, tell the entire story, probably more eloquently than we could. I think it would be great, though, to listen to the final remarks of Ariane Space Director Mr. Bigot and, of course, his customers. At the same time, perhaps you might mention, Measat, a bit about StarSem.
Yes, as a continuation and enlargement of our services that we provide to our space community, we also have agreements with the Soyuz launcher from Russia, and we have created a new company called StarSem, which will be responding to the first generation of the constellations launches.
Another, I wouldn't call it exactly a milestone, but a major stepping stone nonetheless.
That is correct. That is correct. That widens the services that provided by Ariane Space.
Now, just as we mentioned earlier that the Arabsat team will be busy in the hours and weeks ahead, hours and days ahead anyway, give us a sense, Measat, for what the Measat team will be doing, and perhaps even in terms of the team, the technical team on Langkawi Island that's going to be very instrumental in putting this satellite into final orbiting position and operational status.
Some 13 minutes, about 13 minutes after the separation, which we have already passed some minutes from that point, I may say less than 10 minutes time, the Langkawi station will receive the telemetry signals from the Measat satellite.
So that same telemetry that we were following, and to some extent with the Ariane, will have its counterpart in telemetry now being received from the Measat satellite.
Correct. And then they will first determine their orbits. They will look at the health of the satellite subsystems, and then some 76 hours from the liftoff, which took place some less than half an hour ago, they will ignite their solid apogee motor to raise the orbit with one shot to circular orbit.
And as I recall, that's a solid fuel motor.
Yes.
And in one very precise maneuver, it's going to burn, and it's going to inject the Measat 2 into its final orbital location.
Correct, and it circularized the orbit to 36,000 diameter geostationary orbit.
Right. So those teams at Arabsat and Measat have a lot of work ahead of them, but so far everything is right on course. Ariane has done its work. We're waiting momentarily for a word or two from Mr. Bigot.
And maybe in the same sense, Paul, we can extend to our all best wishes and good luck wishes to our friends and Measat and Arabsat for their upcoming efforts.
Mr. Bigot.
Let us see, Dr. Mahathir, Excellencies, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Director General, ladies and gentlemen. I am, of course, on behalf of my company, Ariane Space, I am extremely pleased to confirm that the launch of the two satellites, Arabsat 2B and Measat 2, has been a success. And as usual, I think the two satellites are in an excellent, particularly excellent orbit. I know also that at least Arabsat has been able to send the telemetry to Toulouse and to Dirab, near Riyadh, and so I suppose that this satellite, at least it is in good shape. I will congratulate Arabsat for this beginning of the life of the satellite Arabsat 2B. We have not yet the result of the telemetry which we will receive very soon from Langkawi for Measat 2, so I think we will have in a few moments. Let me say that for me this event is a very international one, which is very often the case, and which confirms the vocation of the European launcher, but also the objectives of the Ariane Space company, which is, as you know, to be at the service of all the operators throughout the world. We are extremely pleased to participate through Measat 2, as we do through other satellites, to the very spectacular and rapid expansion of the space telecommunications in the Asia-Pacific zone. And we are also extremely pleased to, after 17 years of cooperation with Arabsat, to participate to the extension of the Arabsat system, which covers 21 Arab countries. So that we hope to continue to be at your service for the future, and we hope to be able to demonstrate that in the near future. We also thank you very much to customers for the confidence put to the Ariane launcher, to the Ariane program, and you can be sure that we will do always our best to continue to serve your interest. For our company, it is an interesting record which has been broken this year also. We have launched today the 14th and the 15th satellite of the year, so that we increase, and we will continue to increase, the capacity of the launch services by Ariane at the service of your company. Thank you very much for listening. And let me now give the chair to Dr. Al-Bidna, the Director General of Arabsat. Dr. Al-Bidna.
Thank you, Mr. Bigo. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excuse me to say some words in Arabic, and then I will say some words in English. Alhamdulillah, والشكر له على نجاح هذا الإطلاق والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. تهاني القلبية الصادقة لكم مواطني الأعزاء في كافة الدول العربية وأينما كان موقعكم بهذا النجاح والتوفيق. وتهنئة خاصة لكم إخوتي من ماليزيا. والشكر أجزله بعد الله إلى معالي الوزراء الاتصالات والإعلام في الدول العربية، وإلى سعادة رئيس وأعضاء مجلس إدارة عربسات، وإلى كل من شارك وساهم في تحقيق هذا النجاح. وأشكر زملائي في عربسات الذين واصلوا العمل الجاد بكل الإخلاص والتفاني. وأخيرا وليس آخرا، الشكر لكم أيها الضيوف الكرام على ما تكبدتم من مشاق السفر أينما كنتم في مواقعكم، واقتطعتم من وقتكم الثمين لمشاركتنا الاحتفال بهذه المناسبة الهامة في تاريخ عربسات. هذا اليوم أيها السادة سوف يكون معلما بارزا في مسيرة عربسات الموفقة بإذن الله، وسيكون منطلقا لدخول عربسات مرحلة تقديم أحدث ما وصلت إليه تقنية الاتصالات. أكرر شكري وأسأل الله العلي العظيم أن يوفقنا إلى ما نصبو إليه لخدمة الإنسانية بصفة عامة، ولخدمة أمتنا العربية وتحقيق أهدافها السامية بصفة خاصة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Ladies and gentlemen, praise is due to Allah, and my hearty congratulations to all Arabs and to our Malaysian friends for the success of this launch. I thank all those who have contributed and participated to make this success achievable. My appreciation and thanks go to Aerospatiale team for their appreciated efforts in manufacturing the satellite and supporting this launch campaign. To Ariane Space and CNES team for their continuous and excellent cooperation and support. And to my colleagues in Arabsat who worked tirelessly, even at odd times, I would like to extend my deep thanks to our distinguished guests everywhere who spared their precious time to participate in this very important event in Arabsat history. This day, no doubt, will be another major milestone in Arabsat history. It will signal the starting point for Arabsat to implement its ambitious plan for introducing a variety of the latest telecommunication services in the Arab world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Bidna, for your very kind word, and I congratulate you again. Let me also indicate that we just hear about good news for Measat 2, which has been acquired at the Langkawi station. So, and now let me give the chair to Nanif, the chairman of our customer, Ariane, And we are extremely honored also by the presence of Dato Sri Dr. Mahathir, the Prime Minister of Malaysia, who will also give some address to you. Tun Hanif.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang amat berhormat Datuk Seri Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, yang amat bahagia Datuk Seri Siti Asmah, yang berhormat Datuk Umar Rahmat, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is the second time I'm here in this building here, watching a Measat satellite being launched. And I must say that although this is the second time, I had my apprehensions and trepidations, quite like what was predicted by the chairman of Arabsat 10 months ago, that you never get used to this, that there's always an element of risk, there is a lot of money and prestige riding on the success. And on this successful launch, both of Arabsat 2 and 2B and of Measat 2, I would like to congratulate Ariane and say also many, many thanks to them. Also many thanks to Hughes. And I think from now on, it's up to Hughes to steer Measat 2 into its proper slot. And I'm quite sure that they will do this. Steve Dorfman and company will do this as usual with great success. I'm sure, in particular, my Malaysian friends here and at home would like very much to hear from our beloved Prime Minister what his feelings and views are of this particular occasion. Sir, could you please oblige us?
I'll speak in Malay first. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera kepada hadirin sekalian. Saya berasa amat gembira kerana petang ini di Kuru saya berpeluang untuk melihat sebuah kapal angkasa roket Ariane Space yang telah membawa satelit, dua buah satelit, satu Arabsat, satu Measat, dan telah dilancar dengan jayanya, dan kita telah mendapat maklumat bahawa Langkawi sudah pun menerima signal daripada satelit ini. Dan ini adalah satu sekali lagi kejayaan dalam pelancaran yang mana Malaysia boleh berbangga dengannya. Dan kita berharap dengan pelancaran ini kita akan dapat banyak berfaedah daripada adanya satelit Measat ini untuk kegunaan kita, dan saya percaya dia akan membawa kita menuju ke arah wawasan 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, firstly I would like to say thank you to Ariane Space for the success of the Ariane 4 satellite rocket, which has launched the Arabsat as well as Measat just now. This is my first experience of watching such a launch, and I must say I was a little bit pessimistic because I seem to see things failing whenever I'm present, which is one reason why I never watch football or any other game, because it worries me, and eventually my side invariably lose. But here I am on the winning side, and I would like to thank Ariane Space for doing such a good job. Also, I would like to thank Hughes for producing this satellite, which has been launched, and I'm quite sure from now on it's going to be Hughes' responsibility to do the finishing touches on the flight of this satellite until, of course, at a later stage, Measat will take over and manage it. I would like to thank everybody, especially for giving me a chance to see the rocket actually take off. At first, it was proposed that I should stay inside there and watch all those nice pictures, but it's not quite the same as watching the rocket actually taking off, which is why I preferred not to have the privilege of being inside there, but being with the very ordinary people outside. We didn't have that privilege. Once again, I would like to say thank you very much to Ariane Space, to Hughes, and to everyone concerned who have contributed towards the success of this launching. And I hope that both Arabsat and Measat will function well and probably will be able to work together with Arabsat also in the future. Thank you.
The congratulatory speeches, I think, speak for themselves. In a moment, we're going to be getting another replay of tonight's launch. Here we go. And there we have it, some spectacular shots in replay of tonight's launch of Flight 92 of the European launcher Ariane. Now at Jupiter 2, as you can see, we're coming to the conclusion of the evening's programming. Masood, it's been a pleasure as always working with you, and it's always, of course, a pleasure to see an absolutely picture-perfect launch.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having you also here tonight with me. It was a pleasure to work together, and all the best for our customers for their upcoming events.
And I'd also like to thank all the people that have been following tonight's events with us, from El Segundo, California, all the way to France, and all the way across the Arab world, and across Malaysia and the East Pacific. It's been a pleasure bringing you tonight's event. And we look forward to having you with us the next time Ariane launches.
Goodbye.
Goodbye and good night. And good morning to those of you in the Far East.
Astronomers at the Jodrell Bank Radio Telescope in Cheshire are claiming to have made the first discovery of a planet outside the solar system. The discovery, the result of 6 years' research, is being hailed as the most important development in astronomy this century.
Scientists were studying what's called a neutron star, formed after a big star. It's 30,000 light-years away in the Milky Way. It's a pinprick of light. The claim has shortened the odds that life does exist outside the solar system.
De ontdekking door Andrew Lyne van een planeet bij een andere ster was een grote doorbraak. Eindelijk was er bewijs dat ons zonnestelsel niet alleen stond in het heelal. Lyne wilde zijn vondst nader toelichten op een congres in Amerika. Kort voor zijn vertrek nam hij zijn gegevens nog eens door en stuitte tot zijn grote schrik op een fout. Zijn planeet was ineens verdwenen.
I was just completely numb for half an hour. I just sat there going through everything that I'd said over the last 6 months to all sorts of people, realizing that it